had a good grace note in that pop.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're
Flammy.
back. Man, we have some very, very obvious things to talk about. But also, I think you'll notice over the course of this podcast, we'll hit some of these hot topics that are very much on the forefront that recently have happened. But also, just kind of want to give some uplifting, positive vibes out in the world. So we won't stay too Debbie Downer for too long, and we'll steer it in another direction.
Yeah, Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. So before we dive right in, welcome everyone to the Aged Out podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me as always is
Evan Worrell.
And today we have a guest on again that we've had on in the past. We figured it'd be appropriate to have Mr. Dan Schack back on again to kind of talk about all the developments that have happened in the band world, and then also kind of take a different direction and just kind of reminisce a little bit, kind of do along the lines of what ESPN's been doing in the sports networks with no live sports to watch, and talk about our favorite drum lines and just all kinds of things related to that. Just kind of take a walk down memory lane. So welcome back, Dan. How you been?
Just great, as everyone else is. It seems like you go in public and everyone is having the same conversation. So it's interesting how it's like we're all being quarantined, but we are all like under the same circumstances. It's very, very odd and very weird.
Yeah, we're living a very interesting part of history right now. I was talking to my dad about that earlier, about how like 30 years from now, like history books, or 100 years from now, are going to talk about this exact happening. Like the world shut down, basically.
I agree. I think it's going to be a pretty large blip on, a series of events that we've experienced in the 20th and 21st century that are, shifted paradigm a little bit. And there's been a lot of interesting conversations, at least in, the small circles that I run in politically, and what is going on in terms of what's being forced upon the government. And, when we're really under the gun, what are we able to provide for, the people in the country? So in that way, it's like, wow, this is really eye-opening to what is actually possible. And at the same time, it's still a very like political moment where we're so embedded in like in politics right now as an entryway into this whole thing. So just the way that like the media and like the truth of what's happening has been so weird in this specific instance, because we have so much information, yet we're all so confused and it's so convoluted. Yep. So what's that about? You know what I mean? And it's just like such a specific moment. I think the media is going to play a pretty large role in how this all shakes out, what this appears as.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a hindsight to look back on some of these situations where we just very evidently realize glaring issues in all these kind of systems that we have in place of like, oh, we could have done this a lot better, or we just didn't get information out the most effective way possible. Even to like the hospitals and physicians, like I know someone, this is going to be like, I know someone who knew someone who knew someone kind of story, but I was talking to him and he was like, yeah, I was hanging out with this chick and she ended up going to get tested, the swab, and get results. So then in turn I went, but they wouldn't test me because they were like, no, just like they basically told me like, we don't know, like we don't know what to tell you. So we don't think you're symptomatic, but we're just not going to test you. And so people are just like, they don't even know what's going on. He's like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's pretty wild.
It's definitely a weird time. To spell out the main initial topic we're going to talk about, if you haven't already figured it out, obviously the coronavirus thing going on right now, people are in their homes, and the relevant happening to this podcast and our listeners, I would think, is that pretty quickly when everything started to go down and everybody realized how serious this could be, WGI canceled everything. Like, just canceled the entire season. Guard, percussion, winds, all of it. The athletic organizations went with, we're going to try to play these with no crowds, and so maybe WGI. I thought maybe WGI would do that, but then you still have a lot of people from all across the country, from all these different states and other countries in some cases, all congregating in one area. It's just, even without the crowd, you still have so many people all together at once that when they eventually canceled it, I was a little surprised, but not really. How did you guys take it when you first heard what happened?
I think when you zoom out at what we do, it's extremely reliant on facilities, period. And when you look at, you kind of sift through the fun and the sort of the buzz and the magic and all of the like things that are really, really fun about just what we do and why we're all so attracted to this super like niche thing. Underneath that is like an infrastructure beyond our own, which to me is like the facilities, both athletic facilities, schools, that are really making decisions that are beyond their own, decision-making power, right? So it starts to ripple out into the bureaucracy of, total school systems and governments and state governments. And, you looked at what happened in Ohio when they started to, send the kids home from university. They start to shut down all the schools. For WGI, we have so many venues in the Ohio area.
Mm-hmm.
And when one goes, the whole thing, I can assume. I did work for WGI actually as a marketing intern in the 2012 year. So I'm not speaking completely ignorantly, but obviously I'm not working there now. But I can imagine, and I am imagining that, once one facility goes, you're scrambling to find a new one, then two others go, and that process is going to happen, extremely fast, because the schools, I think, were the first institutions to kind of react, because it's such an obvious meeting ground of high populations, rather than just like closing cities down and like the actual, infrastructure of cities and towns. So when you think about what the schools are doing and the decisions they have to make, to me, it was the obvious answer, and there was no other answer, because it wasn't like WGI as a governing body could be like, we're going to do it. Like, we're going to do it regardless. Like, that wasn't a possible alternative at all, if you ask me, and I would assume they would probably agree. So I wasn't surprised at all, not to be totally like, cynical or whatever, but I had mentally prepared myself a couple of days or even like, a week leading up to that, like, wow, this is really happening fast in the acceleration period of things and the way people are reacting and the way institutions are having to make decisions. We didn't have the time to make any decision but the one that was made. So I think it was the obvious choice, and it was probably the only choice that they could make.
Yeah, the governor of Ohio was a pretty big trailblazer really across the country for just making the decision. He made it really early on, like, no spectators in any sports, like for Cleveland Cavaliers, Columbus Blue Jackets, like the Dayton NCAA March Madness games, like no spectators. Like, he made that call pretty early on. And once I heard that, I was like, dude, that's rough. There's no way. Because I think there was a glimmer of hope from talking to some people that were staff members of other ensembles. Like, if the only WGI we could get is one without spectators, we'd gladly take it. But that would just be such a big financial burden on WGI if that was even an option. Like, yeah, we'll let you all continue, but you can't have spectators, because I'm sure they're so heavily reliant on ticket sales from the ticket office and merchandise and this and that. They hold down between the guard weekend probably like 4 or 5 facilities, like Wright State and the Nutter UD and like another place at NKU, and then the next weekend at Percussion Finals, like the same thing. Like, there's no way they could afford to rent out those facilities for 2 straight weekends without ticket sales and those ensembles coming in. And then it was very quickly after they were just made the decision, like, no, there's no sporting events, and like all these organizations canceled. So it was pretty wild.
Yep. The first thing, honestly, that jumped into my head is a question that you mentioned the NCAA canceled everything too, which I'm sure everybody knows about at this point. But what about the age outs? Do they end up getting another season? And they've answered that question at this point, correct?
Yes.
So WGI, I think rightfully so. Did they grant everyone in an independent ensemble an extra season, or just age outs?
I believe it was just age outs who were currently contracted for this season.
Well,
if you're in a group, you can march again. If you were an age out that was in a independent world group, you can come back. It doesn't mean that if you were 18, you get to march an extra year. Like, we're not counting people who had extra years regardless. You just didn't get to march finals. But if you just, like, if it was your age out and it was your final kind of year to go, you can march another year. And I am under the impression that means anywhere. So if you march a certain ensemble and you want to go somewhere else, you have the option to do that, which opens up really interesting doors. And there's already been quite a bit of conversation about how auditions are going to look, and that, potentially how strong of a year of WGI we could have next year, considering that, hypothetically, if every single age out came back, which is 100% not going to happen, these groups would be very, very coming out confidently, coming out stacked, quote unquote. But life is going to come, and people are going to have to not march. So I'm not thinking that these ensembles are going to come out exactly the same as they were.
Yeah, there will be people that are unable to march, because if you were supposed to age out, you're probably going to be done with college, potentially having a job that would make it kind of difficult to march. I know Evan did that with a job his last year at Rhythm X, but I also
but even that, I wouldn't have been able, I would have moved on at that point from, my age out. If this had happened my age out year in 2012, there's no way I would have come back for 2013. I already was married from December to April of my age out year. And I would just be like, nah, I'm done.
That wedding was awesome, by the way. That was a fun wedding. It was super fun.
It was a very fun wedding.
I still believe that I'm the only Rhythm X member to ever march a season married. I'm pretty confident in that. I'm pretty confident. I was talking to Andrew Markworth about it, and he was like, I don't know of anybody else. And he would probably be one of the...
check that.
Yeah, so...
Well, no, I look at another viewpoint of this as, if you have a bunch of guys that should have aged out, and girls that should have aged out, come back, you're taking a year from a younger person, if that makes sense. So, you're delaying somebody's potential jump up to that top tier of indoor by a whole year. So you're almost having to take a year from somebody to give it to somebody that got one taken away, if you look at it from that perspective.
I've seen that argument floating around, but I'm always going to err on the side of something that I knew was guaranteed instead of something that could have been. There's no guarantee that person would have ever made that ensemble. But we actually did have a contract with this kid to march WGI finals. He was in the group. So I'm always going to err on doing the right thing that way. Then, of course, it will probably mean that some people, but like Dan was saying, not everybody's going to come back. They just won't. And
I also would say, not to mention, you've now auditioned every vet for X amount of months, through March or whatever. That doesn't give them a leg up. It means that I have more insight into who is possibly coming back, and that can be good for you or it can bite you as a member. Just because you know someone, or even you marched a year, it doesn't mean that you have a leg up. Having someone come in that's fired up and that's fresh and that isn't, jaded, or whatever can happen as you march more and more years, it doesn't ensure anything. So I think it will just make auditions more competitive. It will up the top level even more. And I agree, Evan. I like that point that you made, which is these people who are aging out, literally didn't get to march their age out and attempt or make finals, versus hypothetically, this young kid might make it. Well, go just make it. You know what I mean? There's so many ifs and buts. I just don't think that's enough of an argument. And if, for the kids who are man, well, all these guys who are marching in 20 have a better shot in 21. It's well, why didn't you march somewhere in 20? Where were you? So I've seen a little bit of that floating around too. And it's just because you regret not marching this year because you had an extra year doesn't mean we should tailor everything to your dissatisfaction over your past decisions. You know what I mean? Versus what we were actually affected by for real. You don't know how that's going to affect the audition pool. It's going to be different. It's going to definitely be a different vibe, a different turnout.
For sure.
In whatever way.
Yeah.
And I think that will kind of segue that into talking about next year and auditions in 2021. I think a lot of people from staffing and design standpoint have some decisions to make, whether they're going to stick with the same show that they had this year, or maybe design a new show and have a similar show but modify it. I think it creates an interesting opportunity for designers to look at almost what was from October, or we'll say November, late October, November, from the audition point up until March. They've had to really fine-tooth comb their show and tweak it, but now they almost get an off season to be all right, we had some things that we can really fix now to upgrade this product and really, really max it out to its full potential, like squeeze all the juice out. So I think that creates some interesting conversation as well.
I think some groups are going to be happy they get to hit the redo button. I just think there were some shows that were duds this year, and I think the staff's kind of, not that they would not want the members to get to finish the season. That's what everyone, I'm pretty sure, would prefer to have happened. But I think there's going to be some people that might enjoy a redo or getting to rethink some things.
That's definitely possible. I think when you look at WGI as a whole, one thing that I think the activity for indoor does super well is not impose rules, or impose only the least extreme rules that kind of go into the creativity realm and go into what we choose to do year to year.
Mm-hmm.
And, the idea of making a decision about a rule that we can or can't do the same shows gets into some realms philosophically that I think are sort of counter to what WGI has been. Right now you can do an old show. If you're an independent world group, you could probably do a show that's been done. Will it be, will people like that? Will it be something that people enjoy? I mean, can you even do that seriously? That's such a silly thought experiment that you repeat a show that did well. I think that is kind of just an ironic thing. I have a hard time thinking of that in a non-ironic way, but it's the most extreme version of this idea that WGI, they don't want to infringe upon our creative kind of things. They want us to do as much or as different as we can do. And this seems to be an area where they would not intervene, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think they'll leave it open. I think they'll let the groups decide.
I think that the groups will decide. Plus, I mean, it only makes sense that way because even though maybe Group X does a show one year and doesn't typically do that same show the next year, which I don't think has ever happened in WGI, maybe it has, but Group X may do a show and then Group Y buys that show and does the same show. So maybe it's not in the same class, maybe it's not even in the same circuit, but that stuff still exists out there. So it's not like this product that Group Y is doing is something completely new and original, but it's just something that works for that program. So I think it's going to come down.
Right. Not to interrupt, but that sounds more extreme than the idea that we all come out and we do design a certain way and we have similarities each year. And we have talked about, and I've heard you guys talk about on here, groups coming out and seeming, similar year to year. And that's part of building, the identity of a group, basically. So I don't think that's super different than what we even do already. It's we want to come out and have signatures about the way we are and kind of what we present each year. So is that even so different? You know what I mean? That we do something similar, we treat it a similar way.
Right.
I just wonder about that.
I mean, even to the point to when somebody is designing a show, I'm sure they're thinking ahead of the categories and the vocabulary that's on the sheet as it relates to judges and what judges are going to say, the vocabulary, the demand, the variety. I mean, people want to hit all that stuff. It is formulaic to a sense. So, I mean, yeah. I don't think there's a rule, and I don't think, like you're saying, I don't think CWGI implementing a rule just for this case to prevent it. I mean, heck, one of my favorite DCI shows of all time was duplicated year after year, it was done back to back by the same group, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, so there was nothing about that.
It's we I think in a rhetorical way, we like to think about the most extreme variations of things. And when I think about this idea of finishing a show, you think about color guards who come out every other year, like Pride of Cincinnati or something like that. And they're coming out and they take 2 years to design a show regularly. There's actually no restriction to that as far as I know. If George Mason wanted to come out every 3 years and work on a show for 3 years straight, we could do that. It's really hard to be relevant. I think your brand needs to stay in people's conversations, but I think there's nothing telling us we can't just come out every 3 years. Imagine if we did that. So this isn't as maybe extreme as it feels right now, or as the rhetoric that's spiraling out there a little bit. I think we can look at examples of when people have done things like this, and it's like, okay, is this really so different than what is already going on or what has happened before? Maybe even in, like, not drumline, but color guard, for example.
Well, hasn't even like Imachi, to a degree, like they used to come out a little bit more consistently, like every 2 years or something. Like they would, I think
Right.
there were people that say, oh, they worked on the show for 2 years. It's like, well, maybe they did. But then also,
Nope.
I know we were talking a little bit prior to starting this up, is that there were some groups who either went to WGI regionals and didn't compete against a single group in their class, or didn't even go to a WGI regional period because they hadn't got to that point of the season. So it's like, who's to say, like, you guys actually never got the ability to put your show out there. So, like, okay, like, sure, maybe you still want to hold on to it.
That's right. So what if there wasn't YouTube? Like, the fact that videos are on YouTube makes us feel like the season happened. But for George Mason, I'm going to speak to what I know best, but like, we didn't compete against anyone. We were never ranked. We just did 2 rounds in a single regional, and then we were canceled. It was done. We didn't make it to the New Jersey regional. So, for our main competitor in our region, which is United, they didn't go to a WGI regional. They didn't compete even in the circuit that we predominantly discuss as the main circuit. So, yeah, United's show and George Mason's shows might be on YouTube. It doesn't mean that they like even competed in WGI. You know what I mean? So, we'll see what happens with that. I think we're going to see variations, and we're going to see people, like Mike said, it's like, if you didn't love what you ended up with at the end of 20, this is a perfectly good time to start over. There's no problem with that. If you are really invested in the show and you want to finish it, there's no problem with that. And if we're being judged show of the night, why does any of this matter?
Yeah,
if it's all about the show
bingo.
of the night, if your show stands a testament of time, do it.
Yeah.
We're judging the show of the night. I just want to throw that out there.
And I think you're going to see some groups completely come out and scrap everything from this season. I think you'll see some that take the skeleton or the idea but do some things differently. And I think you're going to see some groups do very, very close to the same thing they had this season. No one will be identical because you've got more time to think. You've got more time to develop. You've gotten to try things that worked, didn't work. Maybe there were things in the show at this point in the season that you knew you wanted to change before finals but hadn't yet. You'll probably get to make those changes, whether it be drill tweaks, music tweaks, whatever. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I think next WGI for percussion, and probably, I don't know much about the winter guard side, but probably for that too, for a lot of the same reasons, it's going to be a heck of a strong season. I think a lot of groups are going to be really good.
I agree. And I think when you consider that we designed for the arena and for the crowd in the arena and for the space and the scope of the arena, it's very unfortunate that some of these programs are never going to see, midnight in UD. So I think, I don't want to limit what people do because of how I feel right now. I think everyone should make a decision and honestly welcome each other's decisions, because that's what we're supposed to be doing in the first place. And we should be judged when we show up in the first round. And that's that. It doesn't really matter. Only, I guess, if I thought about WGI judges, probably 7 WGI judges saw George Mason's show. A lot didn't. Maybe through a video, but we all see videos and we're like, this isn't the same. It's not as good. It's not the same. So, that's just my personal situation. Other people might be saying you can't do that, but I'm interested. These conversations are going to change. People's opinions are going to change as we get into design mode and just going forward as we just reflect more. So it's interesting. We're at a super different philosophical moment for our activity. I think this is a moment we have not maybe confronted as literally yet.
For sure. Well, I'm going to take that and kind of shift gears real quick. Just touch on, there's not been a lot of information come out as far as regards to the summer. I know some groups have canceled camps. Obviously, I'm sure that has a lot to do with the facilities that they're able to access. Like we were talking about earlier, a lot of school systems are shut down. So I'm sure a lot of that is just in tandem with what's happening with individual school systems. Like, oh, we can't have camp this weekend. Makes sense. Schools aren't even open. DCI put out a pretty vague statement that they're just monitoring the situation, which I feel like is all they really can do at the current time. Everything changes pretty quickly, almost daily. There's a new update, or this is happening, or that's happening. So I'm sure they're having some very in-depth conversations on the back end of that. We're all very, very hopeful. I know they had posted like, hey, we're throwing out ideas of a full tour. We're throwing out ideas of a condensed tour. Like, they're kind of trying to plan for a little bit of everything. So, we're all crossing our fingers, super optimistic about that, trying to send good vibes out in the universe. But we'll just see what happens.
Yeah. Something else I think would be interesting to think about. We talked about the age out issue with WGI. If drum corps ends up for whatever reason, and like Evan said, none of us three have any idea what they're thinking. We have no connections. We don't know what's going on. We're as informed as all of you. But say the summer doesn't happen. You have a lot of age outs that have been contracted for the summer at this point. Even though the season hasn't started, technically, would they get an extra summer?
I don't know. That's a tough.
Think yes.
I mean, I would say yes.
I think that they would have to see what WGI did and be like, we're going to have to follow suit with that.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the case even if WGI did it. But I don't think there's a way that you could look at what WGI did and DCI just be like, well, we're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think with DCI's case, it may be a little bit – I think they would maybe have to modify it, or at least consider modifying it for not only 1 year but possibly 2, just to kind of maybe help condense and not condense but spread out that effect that it would have on possible new members. Because you could really decimate an entire core in a whole season if you had – not only one group of age outs, but 2 group of age outs now aging out in the same season. I don't think that that's as likely or as high of numbers for indoor, but say a typical WGI or a DCI group has, I don't know, 30 age outs in an ensemble, which is probably a low number, but maybe for some it's low, but some it's high. The next year, if you double that, then you have 60 age outs from your group. So I don't know. It's kind of a give and take. It's an interesting thought. But if you kind of spread that out over we're going to increase the age out year for 2 years, maybe that would just help spread out the effect that it would have. I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
Possibly, yeah.
I think personally the groups who have a lot of age outs tend to be the groups that are likely competing well, and they're going to get good people to come through their doors no matter what. I think the cores that we don't think about are going to be the open class cores, the minus 15 cores or 12 rather, who aren't in DCI finals, and how they're impacted. And if they're impacted, those are the ones we probably should be thinking about the most. And, I would be interested in knowing how many age outs did an open class core have? Who won open class? How many age outs do they have? Okay. Let's start thinking about how that's going to affect those lower groups that are more concerned with membership. And when I mean lower, I mean smaller numbers. Because this was specifically came up in the DCI meetings about the all instruments thing, was how this was going to benefit those cores that are kind of struggling to fill out their ranks regardless. So those are the ones I think are going to be confronting some specific issues. Whereas, you think about the Blue Devils, they always have a lot of age outs. They always have a lot of good people coming in. Is that totally going to change?
I would say it wouldn't. Yeah, I think you're right. I agree.
I don't know. I don't work with an open class group, so I'm very interested in how is it going to affect groups that are looking to get people in their doors, and do those groups already have an age out problem? Maybe not. I'm kind of speculating. So it might not be as big of a thunderous issue. But, okay, extending it 2 years or something like that, just being a little more flexible. I mean, let's keep in mind, I'm going to shatter reality for a second, but these age out rules are completely arbitrarily imposed. If we had 0 age out rules in world class drum corps, and if we had 0 age out rules in world class independent world WGI, would the landscape look all that different? I don't think so. I don't think it would. So I think the idea of slightly relaxing the rules is totally doable. I don't think it's going to cause the quake that we think it will. But, I think we're going to have to make some decisions in the next couple years for sure to kind of make sure that drum corps continues on some similar path, it's going to change. Something's going to change about what we're doing. There's no question.
Well, here's a way to think about it. You're talking about the open class corps or the lower ranking corps and how this would affect them. So say you have the people that were supposed to age out this summer get an extra summer. So then you have the following summer for 2021 a doubly or twice the size of your age out group. So then those 2 years all age out at the same summer, leaving a ton of open spots at the upper tier of drum corps. Then you've got all those spots are going to be filled primarily by members from those lower corps. So then you're leaving all of them scrounging for twice as many members as they would any other year. And I think that could have negative impacts on their competitive viability.
Yeah, I think this speaks to a bigger problem that when students don't make a top drum corps, they generally don't march at all. Yep. And I tell any student that doesn't make Crown, you need to just march anywhere. Go get experience. I marched DCA. I taught open class. You can get better in a DCA or an open class group. And students who don't make a top 12 drum corps, top 3 drum corps, should just pursue marching, period, because that's what the activity needs is younger students who are dipping their toe in. And there is supposed to be a striation in the caliber of drum corps. We can't just have everyone makes every single drum corps and that's it. That's just not the nature of what we do. So I think that if we could maybe shine light on something more, like a more positive message, it would be when you don't make that top corps, you should be marching. You should go out there and march open class or a local DCA group if you can. Because a lot of students that don't make it, they go sit on their couch and they're like, I'm going to just drum on my pad all summer. I don't recommend that.
Don't recommend that at all. Just to give some numbers, I did a quick Google search and a article by Andy Shama on Flow Marching came up where they did age outs for the 2017 and 2018 season. The highest corps in 18 were Crown and BD with 55 age outs, but they went down through the finalists though. But the lowest was Mandarins in 2017 had 13 age outs. Finished 13th place. They had 24 age outs in 2018 and finished in 10th place. And then Crossmen were 12th. They had like 28. So it's like, that's not a lot. 24 age outs. That's not a ton. So I don't think it's going to matter.
Not at all.
I mean, you're talking about BD in 2017 having 60, but like you said, they're going to reload because that's what people do.
Right.
Yep.
So I agree with that. Okay. That makes sense.
Let's move this sucker on. Do you want to get into some of the more less gloom and doom topics we talked about?
Dude, heck yeah. All right. We kind of came up with this game plan beforehand that we just kind of need to inject some like fun and positivity out there. We didn't want to stay all boo-boo kitty for the whole thing here. So we just talked about going through some of our maybe like favorite shows, whether it's DCI, WGI, favorite drum lines from DCI. I put together a pretty healthy list of shows that I just really liked. And when I was thinking about specific years, whatever that year, 2000, 2001, 2006, like a core stuck out to me. And I was like, oh, yeah, that show. So I don't really care if you guys have a preference starting DCI or WGI. WGI will probably go faster, but.
I didn't prepare anything, so I'm ready to go.
All right.
Yeah,
I'll take the charge then, and we'll go through some years. And any other shows that stick out from those years that you guys, or we can just comment on them. I started back in 1988 though, because, and I didn't do every single year, so don't. It's not gonna take long, but just some shows that stuck out to me from '88. 1988 Madison Scouts, they played Malagueña. 1988 SCV, they did Phantom of the Opera, which they also did in '89 and won a championship. But the '88 show is way better to me. I just liked it more. I like the arrangements better.
Wait, they did the same show 2 years in a row?
2 years in a row. Yeah, they finished, I believe, second in '88, and they finished first in '89.
Well,
Phantom of the Opera,
there you
both
go.
years.
You can do the same show 2 years in a row. It's been done.
And
but yeah, going that far back.
Even though some of the fans may be like, oh, they did it, like Dan was saying earlier, if you're judged on that night, whatever.
Yeah, if you're great, you're great. Yeah, we're going that far back, I am a terrible drum corps and WGI historian. I'm like scrounging behind to write down some suggestions of like, what's the drum corps show that I like a lot. Like I've never been one of those kids or people that learned a bunch about past shows. I never was that guy.
I ate it up.
So I mean, you're basically a dork, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Band nerd. I'll make a jump here. So 92, 93, I put Cadets both years. 92 to Tame the Perilous Skies. Cadets, 93, did the whole singer closer, just iconic. I know a lot of people are like, Star should have won 93, and maybe they should have, but that Cadets show was damn good. Man, they were good.
I don't think I've ever seen the Cadets. I think I need to take a minute and go find that somewhere. I'm sure it's on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, like, once you start getting into like those last couple of years of the 80s and then the first couple of years in the 90s with the Cadets, like, that's where the drill and the velocity thing starts to pop off. And you watch like 93 Cadets all the way through, really, like, I mean, a lot, 15 more years of the Cadets, just the visual excellence, the drill orientation where the design and the effect is very driven by this new style of drill. You know, their feet are super clean with the pinstripes and the white dinkles. Like, it's just all about that lower body cleanliness, high speeds, like the tempos start to get super fast. And there's some really good drum lines, 93 Cadets, 91 Cadets, and then you get into like 97, 8, 9, 10 Cadets, like some of those drum lines. And obviously, like, for me, I started drum corps 2005, so my in-depth knowledge probably goes back to about 2000 in depth, which people are going to, well, I don't know about your guys' listeners, though. We might not get like smited as bad as we feel like we should. But for me, like, going back to like 97, 8, 9, then 2000 Cadets is like this very quintessential couple years where Tim Maynard and Tim Green, Chris Vale comes into it. Some really iconic drummers, and at least snare drummers from my standpoint. And 2000 Cadets, which is the Disney show, is like seriously one of the best drum corps shows ever. And just the drum feature is so iconic, and they're super clean. Like, it's just so uniform, and uniformity was very big in that era. The judging has changed. Uniformity was huge in those years, even late 90s all the way through 2000. It's so different now. I don't think judging is the same.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's point out some stuff outside of the Cadets. I know they were very motivating, and I guess they were
very dominant
trailblazers in the evolution of drum corps. But I know BD had a lot of good years in that decade. The Cavies were really, really good. So what else you got?
Oh, we're gonna get there.
All right, I'm sorry, I'm rushing it.
Early 90s too. I put like just VK on my list. The old Velvet Knights.
Oh man,
some of those shows out there marching into the Chuck T's with like the neon hats, just
the shark,
but absolutely like
judge.
Ripping through like drum stuff. Mid 90s, 96, Phantom Regiment did Defiant Heart, which was a great show.
Yeah,
Tide.
98, Tim Fairbanks.
96, yeah. Tim Fairbanks was center snare, and then Blue Devils tied them that year with the Club Blue Gangster Chronicle show, which is sick. 97.
I gotta ask before you get too far past it. What year did Velvet Knights do the show? It was like a lot of their shows were kind of like happy-go-lucky, I guess, satirical maybe a little bit. What year did the shark eat the judge?
I don't remember, but I think it was 93 where they had like a blow-up dinosaur T-Rex, and at one point there was like a Wicked Witch of the West riding a bicycle across the field or something like that.
It was probably that show.
Sounds right. Yeah,
it was probably that show.
But yeah, 97 Scouts did the Pirates of Lake Mendota show, which is really fun. 99 was apparently just a great year for drum corps because I wrote down a bunch of different groups. Glassman 99 did the Empire of Gold show. Mm-hmm. 99 Colts actually did the first show that I ever heard the Dies Irae in, which Crown did in 15 in the Inferno show. Then 99 SCV placed first with the Inventions of a New Millennium, and that show was just sick. And then all those Cadets shows were great. Those BD shows were great. 99 is a sick year for drum corps, in my opinion.
It was.
2000s, busting into the Cavaliers, Niagara Falls.
Now we're talking.
BD did Methods of Madness that year, maybe it was 02. And then Cadets did the Millennium Show, like Dan was just talking about. I know we had actually done Brian Stalker. We did an interview with him on one of our podcasts. He was in that show. I believe that was the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2000.
Dude, 2001 started my love for BD with the Away Day Blue Show. And then just the dominance of the Cadets drumline from the 2000s just like was in peak form.
I mean, those Cadets drumlines are the reason I got into drum corps. Like those early 2000s Cadets, like that's what I grew up watching, like striving and obsessing over wanting to do. And it's
I think those drum lines were the most like quintessential drum corps drum lines. And then if you look at those BD drum lines, they're the ones who start to hybridize with indoor.
Yeah.
You know, you look at RCC 2003, 4, and 5. You look at Devs, and they start to have that crossover. So, like, Devs probably weren't the cleanest drum lines back then, but they were doing, like, the tricky stuff. They were doing the split stuff. They were doing some of those, like, drumming tricks that honestly were, like, inventions, I think, of that time. Maybe I'm only going back so far that I know, but that felt like a turning point. Maybe a little bit later into the 2000s, but, you know, the movement and the visual side of things, like the Blue Devils were very much onto that in a way the Cadets really didn't care about at all, but the Cadets were like super clean, super uniform. And then you have like Cavaliers who like, you know, they won in 2000. I think they won drums. They tied overall with Cadets. And then the Cavaliers, like they don't win drums again until 2011. But those drum lines, like if you think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, those drum lines like are super awesome. Like feels like an era where like every drum line had more of a like different identity, maybe that's just my perception in a nostalgic way, but like Cavaliers drum lines with Brett Kuhn like were super fresh, like just the way they played with like all wrists, like their wrists were like below the rim, and it was just like,
I don't even know how they did
I don't
that.
know how they did it. I watch videos and have no clue how they drum.
Dude, they had that one, I think it was in Niagara where they have this like choo 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 taka, and like I'm like I don't
it was.
How are they even playing these notes right now?
You should get Mike McIntosh on here. He will definitely be able to explain that to you.
We would do it in a heartbeat.
I would do
Hook
that.
that up, Dan. Hook it up for us.
Mac, shout out.
Call you a freakazoid on your drum tape and indoor. Dan Schack, that freakazoid.
Yeah, okay. So for context, what was that? 2011.
11, yeah.
Is it 11? Yeah,
I think it was finals. By the way,
it was prelims. There were only 2 nights then, and it was prelims. Yeah,
that was awesome. Mike Mac.
God.
The 09 Rhythm X Mike Mac tape is fire. We could talk about that for probably an hour.
He's like, I'm going to pass out.
We'll get to that in a minute. But first I have to ask, so do you think the Cabbies in 2000 were better from a percussion standpoint than the Cadets?
Do I?
Yeah.
Dude, that's hard.
I like them better.
I could honestly tell you I've never watched a single front ensemble video from either of those groups from that year. So
I haven't either. So
it's a very honest assessment. If I had to guess, I would bet the Cavaliers front ensemble was better.
Probably.
You know, if the drum lines were perfectly the same, which I feel like happens a lot, where like, oh, these drum lines are like equally good, or like equally thick. It's like usually the front ensemble that we just have completely ignored. So yeah, and so I would bet like based on the culture of the Cavaliers, like their front ensemble probably was superior that year if something had to make the decision. And if you watch the Cavaliers, like they're playing some rhythmic content that is just insane. Like it's just really out of the box stuff, which felt, I don't know, a little bit more progressive than, you know, the Cadets are maybe at the peak of something, and the Cavaliers are sort of a little bit more fresh in that way. So I don't know. It's like almost like a choice. You're like deciding between two very different styles. But the Cadets, I mean, the Cadets 2000 drumline is like super badass. I mean, it's still one of those like
iconic lines.
Yeah, many people would have that on their like top 10 drum lines, I would guess.
Yeah, I would think so. So let's shift to
not done. I'm not done.
I was. Just
I got like
okay.
I got like 4 more shows.
Okay,
All right,
continue.
I skipped
Mike,
up
we're
to
not skipping drum corps.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to.
I skipped up to apparently there were just no shows that I really remembered
Framework
from that year.
Dude.
No.
Framework.
All right. 03 BD did the Phenomena Cool show, and then Phantom Regiment did the Harmonic Journey show, which love both of those. 05, 06, both the shows that came to mind those years were Blue Coat's Caravan and Connex's show. Just super like backbeat heavy, like fun to listen to. Very, I guess, like what's that scale? Harmonic minor type stuff or whatever. My wife's probably in the room like, God, you're an idiot. As far as music theory goes. But then also 2006, the Phantom Regiment Foul show, which is one of my favorite Phantom Regiment drum lines of all time. And then power through here. 07 was the kind of where I stopped. Even though it wasn't the cleanest, I did love that BD Winged Victory show. It was just like so dark and ominous. I was like,
It was real. I do like that show a lot.
Some other drum lines I'll throw out real quick from DCI, just maybe not the shows, but Blue Knights from like the mid to late 90s when Mike Stevens was there. Phenomenal. Cavaliers 2000 I wrote. 2011 I wrote. SCV 99, 03, 04, Glassman 02 when Colin was there. Dude, there's just – I hope people are like pausing this and making a list of drum lines that you've never watched, and you need to scour YouTube and just hunt these down.
I've written down 2 shows I'm going to go watch as soon as we're done recording this. 93 Cadets
I'll send you the
05 Blue
I'll send you
Coats.
this whole list.
Okay, that works.
Dude, Fantini, you marched Blue Coats. You've never seen Caravan.
Nope.
Such a great show.
Yeah,
I told you. I don't go back and watch. I'm not a historian. I never was.
About you.
Jay Bricks was in there, I think. Maybe
He was.
Or
Jared
Josh,
Thomas.
Jared,
Josh
Eric
and
Schreiber.
Eric Schreiber.
Brian Hanley is in 2005 Blue Coats. There's a bunch of really, OG dudes in there.
Yep. So let's talk about what's your favorite like modern drum corps show from the last decade.
Oof. Evan,
Modern
you're
drum
prepared.
corps.
You go first.
I can start.
Yeah.
I know what mine is.
More recent. All right, go ahead.
Mine's Angels and Demons. That show just like did it for me.
Was that 2011?
Yeah, 11 cadets. Like I took that summer off and I watched it a few times live throughout the summer. I love that show. It's so well done. And they executed really well. So
they were clean. Evan, what about you?
Some of my more favorite shows that like stuck out to me were like the 2015 BD Inc. show. Really enjoyed that. A lot of the Crown shows, Inferno and Relentless, I would say, the past 3 years, not as much as that hurts me to say. But definitely Inferno and Relentless, really love those. Trying to think here. Who else has been up there?
I think Tilt and Downside Up are definitely on the list.
Tilt is up
probably
there
my
for
second
sure.
favorite.
I'm gonna come in with a dark horse. I think just maybe because I'm all about what's next, but I think Ghostlight. I think Ghostlight is one of the most like brilliantly staged and complex shows like ever. There's so much depth in the orchestration on every level.
Was
like
that BD?
just the visual depth and the.
Did you say that
progression of the
BD? Did you not
props.
watch DCI this summer?
I did. That's why I was
Sorry,
pretty
you're-
sure it was Ghost. It was BD.
Yeah,
why
I
I knew.
should have said that because we were on a podcast. But
And
I
that's also
think,
part of Evan why I said it, because I wanted to make sure the
Yeah.
audience knew.
Thank you for being thorough. But I think it's unpopular to say that because the Blue Coats are the front runner for the majority of the season. But I think the Blue Devil is just there. I am slightly, I guess, visually more oriented, but I think they are playing a game no one else is playing. So it's like, all right, this is a different. It's formally complex and it's formally deep in a way. I think. Blue Coats are very close and Vanguard's very close, like those top groups in terms of their staging and their integration. It's just like Blue Devils are like a constant magic trick. You don't know how they're even arriving at the moments. Like the vertical moments come from nowhere. You're like, how did this even happen? And it's clever. Like there's so much just like depth to like the concept with the tap shoes and everything.
The
Wild.
staging done in the last probably couple of years has just been so intelligent. Like the way you put it about it's just smart. You don't see things coming. It just kind of all of a sudden just comes together and smacks you in the face. And it's just very, very effective. It's very, very well done.
Scott Chandler, dude, he's the best. He's one of the best out there. We have a couple that are just they have advanced minds with
Too good for their own good.
This is. It's not for their own good because he wins every year. So I think it's deserved. I don't think it might be an unpopular opinion, and I just think looking at what they did, it was just a tremendously seamless vehicle. It was a fully produced idea without any holes in it. So I think I give credence to that. Maybe down the road people will look at Ghostlight and be like, yeah, that was a really good show, but I'm just biased because I live in this world. The now world.
All right.
I like it.
Let's talk about some WGI throughout the years. So I'm
All
assuming
right. Sick. I started in 06. 2006, MCM, they did that freak show.
Then
X Lunaria. I remember RCC did like a geometric show that was just insanely difficult. I remember trying to learn the snare beats that somebody had transcribed and put on like snare signs, and I was like, this is too hard. I can't play it.
The Missy Elliott stuff.
Yes, with the gloves, and then they did the snare feature. I was like, this is insanely hard.
Yeah.
07. Of course, anybody else just jump in. 07 stuck out to
RCC.
me. RCC, and also wrote the E = MCM show. I
think
like
Mike Jackson's baby is in the RCC show. Is
it
it Mike Jackson's kid?
It is.
I think it's a he.
My First Things or something. Yeah, My First
Yeah,
Time
it was like
or something.
That stuff is hilarious. That show's so good. I think they won too, but they did like the jump rope, and it was like super playful, and it was about.
They did like the snare splits, playing like rock paper scissors and stuff.
That's right. Yep, super cool show.
2008, no question. Gone.
Yep.
My favorite X show of all time.
That might be my favorite indoor show of all time.
Bold claim.
It's up there. It's up there, but
we can all can we decide at the end of this what our favorite shows are?
Oh yeah, I got mine written down. So
like favorite ever.
Yeah. So 2008, Gone. I think that was just.
What did RCC do in 08? What did was RCC the Paris show?
I think
when
that
was
2009. Totem was 09.
Totem is 09.
Or no, 09. Yeah, I put Totem
08.
on my.
And then
Yeah,
what did
that-
Mystique do in 08 too? Because I remember that.
Superheroes?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was a
clean,
superhero
dude.
show.
Yeah.
So clean.
The Justin Lewis show.
Yeah, but Justin and Drew and like they were stacked. And they were clean.
Yeah.
And then
2009.
09, of course.
I put Touch and Totem. Also, I really like that Pulse show, that Breath show.
Yep.
Breathe in.
I have
Dude.
judged that about 4 times, by the way. Various groups doing that show.
The Breath show.
I had
They had
judged it in
that-
Pennsylvania so many times.
They had
Hey,
that
man, it's
Hamilton
a good
part.
show. It's a good show.
Yeah, no, I've judged it a bunch of times for sure. And also MCM 2009, they did the Death show, but they again like unbelievably clean drumline, super clean. Of course, the pit. I'm a drumline guy. I'm sorry, MCM. Your pit was also super good, but just an outstandingly clean year. That honestly, 09 there was 3 winning shows. I think everyone agrees with that.
It was a
Top
very
3
strong
Total
year.
and MCM. Yeah.
Yeah,
Dude,
all
that
super
Totem
good.
show
Strong
was
year.
so aggressive and probably one of the best quad lines in WGI history.
It's definitely up there.
Yeah,
I kind
super
of
stacked, all Blue Devils guys.
I kind of glossed through 10, 11, and 12 a little bit just because I was marching. 10, though, if I was going to pick, I mean, we did the Inspired show. I love that show, even though we didn't play the cleanest on finals night. It is what it is. But also, who was the 2010? It wasn't the Pulse show.
Mystique, dude. I love Mystique 2010.
Fantastique.
I love it. I love that year. I would have marched that year for sure.
I actually, so when Evan and I did that project of like timing how long snare drums were playing in shows and stuff a year ago or whenever it was for the podcast, I watched like the progression of shows throughout like a 15-year period of design, and Fantastique was like out of all the boring shows I had to watch, that show stuck out and was like one of the coolest. I watched it like 3 times just because I enjoyed it. It was so cool.
So good.
2011, MCM did the Mantra show. Incredibly clean.
Yes.
March
I actually
barefoot.
like RCC 11. I like the white
Was that
show, the planes.
The planes?
The aeroplane.
Yeah.
Super clean and crispy rather, and just visually, it's very. It was crispy. It was crispy. It was visually very. It stood out. It was minimal. Those red planes amongst the white palette. It was like it's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. 2012, RCC, The Gift, which
that
is
was the
probably
PTSD show, right?
Is probably my favorite WGI show of all time.
You think so?
It's up there. Yeah,
It's the PTSD
I think
show,
so.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's called The Gift. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's about war.
Yep.
Dude, that whole section where they're just doing where they do the audio visual muffled
Slow-mo.
sound, the slow-mo, and dude, that's killer.
Clever. Yeah.
And then 13, I put down X, the Man in the Arena show, and then
Iconic.
RCC, the State of the Art show, which is also really
Also
good.
really awesome.
I didn't put anything number 14. Who won at 14? I don't even remember.
Pulse did That Which Confines Us, and did Razor's Edge.
Razor's Edge, good show. Good drum line. I think they won Hands that year. Shout out Frankie. X won Hands 2 years in a row, I think, actually, for the first time in 13, and then the second time in 14, and then the next year they had 11 snares. So,
we all know what happened there.
Still got second.
Medaled.
But RCC in 15, the Guardians of the Breath, which is
sick.
A sick show. Held the record for WGI for the highest score. I think it should still personally hold the record, in my opinion. But yeah, I also put the Cadets Winter Deconstructed show. I think that show's great.
Thank you.
So I think
Appreciate
that's
that.
just
I forgot about that show.
thought out show.
That was really cool.
Well, that's because you suck.
No, it was a really cool show. I loved that show that year.
We got 5th in Hands, 6th overall, by the way.
Boom.
That's solid.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
Independent World. First of 2 years existing in Independent World.
Got 6th place. The only other show I put on here was the Broken City Spine show, and I wrote after it, but that's it for them. So,
well, I would say, if I had to pick, it's hard to say, what I think is fundamentally, the best show, groundbreaking, made the most change. I think Rhythm X 08 is a pivotal year, but I think, from then on, I think Spine is probably one of my favorite years, just musically, and, the way they constructed their set was very fresh and minimal and holistic. And, I just am, in that moment, it was super new. And we were all just we don't even know. They probably would have won that year if we could evaluate fully objectively, because it was so fresh. And the end of that show was so perfect. They cut with the big scissors that were just
the mic cords.
Yeah, it's just super smart and clever and just artistic. But, I think 08 and 09 Rhythm X, from a concept standpoint, they brought the concept. That's what inspired me about those 2 years, is they made the concept throughout everything they did. It was an idea. That was what Deconstructed was trying to do, was just we're going to do this to everything. So for touch, it was musical touch, visual touch. They were on a bent grid when they marched. Their uniform was all these different fabrics. There's just all this the Easter eggs of the concept. Yeah, that is the roll they did on the spike and at the edge with the little sticks and just all that stuff. They played on the drum with their hands. You just saw the concept everywhere. I think that was really big and cool for a really long time, and I still like that idea of design where it's how can we make this be everywhere? And then there's we've gone in all these different directions, but I think some things MCM have done have been groundbreaking, but RCC every year consistently. 18 RCC stands out to me, which is the archive show when they're with the trumpet. That was great. And, that was a huge year for them.
That was the 7 snares year, right?
Yeah, they missed. I think they were missing a snare drum or 7 snares and then 4 basses
and 4 basses.
They had some.
Yeah.
And they were, and no one cared, of course.
It was so good.
Great, and if you know RCC, then that show is so awesome, because it's just a recall of everything they've done. And honestly, 14 Rhythm X is one of my favorite shows. 2014, which is, again, maybe people won't agree, but I think the way they used dimension in the floor with that crag that they were jumping over, and the way they constructed the perspective of that show. Super fresh, super cool. And they were so clean and just really good.
Yep.
Broken City was close to winning in 2017 with that Spine show. 5th in visual performance caption, though.
Well, not anymore. What they do now is very welcomed, So
they were first. They were first from one judge and 5th from the other.
Right. Well, that should, that should and can happen, but
the spreads weren't out that far, though. So.
Right. Yeah, and it was probably 4/10 or 3/10 or whatever.
They were 6/10 out of first, so that's pretty small from 1st to 5th.
For that caption, that makes sense. But that show was just super great, and just musically, the piano, the minimalism, that was the beginning of what they do now, and just super cool. I need to go watch that. It's making me want to go watch Spine again.
Another show that you were talking about just takes a concept and maxes it out that we would just previously talked about, tilt. We're going to tilt the field. We're going to tilt the instruments. We're going to tilt our bodies. They just took one idea and nuanced it throughout the entire production as many ways as they could. We're going to tilt this pitch, whatever.
Yeah, very indoor approach to that. And, probably wasn't totally received by the drum corps community. And then like a year later or 2 years later, it is, that same idea where you're going to kind of just play with a nucleus of an idea, not so much a story, but an unfolding of an idea. They have Downside Up, or they have the Kinetic Noise show, which is
Kinetic Noise, yeah.
Another really cool drum corps show for like what they actually did with the speakers and what it probably took for them to achieve that. Like, we don't really actually know. So a lot of good shows, actually, now that we talk about it. There's been insane amounts of innovation in the last 5 years. Only 5 years.
It's moving fast.
Yep.
It is moving fast.
So before we wrap this up, what's your favorite indoor show, boys? Let's pick.
RCC 2012. That's what I'm going with.
Okay. Dan?
I'm gonna go with Spine today. I'll go with Spine. I think it's 17 Broken City, right?
Yes.
17, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Spine.
I'm gonna stick with my initial 08X. Gone.
A classic.
Boom.
Yep.
Classic.
There's so many good ones. Like, I'm sitting here I didn't talk a lot for the last 5 minutes. I'm just sitting here thinking, listening to you guys, and like, what is my favorite show? Like,
it's tough, man.
There's so many good ones over the past 15 years. Just so many iconic, artistic, well done shows groups have done. It's so hard to pick. So, well,
we didn't even talk about Guard. We didn't even talk about Independent World Color Guard. We might need to do a little more research, but there's some
we'd have to do a lot
really
more
good
research.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff in there, though. If you actually sit down and watch, now that we're in quarantine, we can all educate ourselves on Independent World Guard and Guard period, Scholastic World Guard.
Dude, Scholastic World Guard. I was watching that like Carmel stuff last year. I was like, this is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that, Dudu and the team from Boston does on every team that he's on, like super innovative, or Michael Gaines, any indoor guard he's involved with, or Blue Coats indoor guard. Like, we're just catching up. Like, we don't know enough about guard to speak intelligently on it, so we all apologize. We got to get like a guard centric person on here. That's the next goal. But there is some guards that we're all just trying to emulate, and the artistry level and the nuance. Paramount, for example, the Elusive Horizons one for me. That was last year. Just a different method, a different way of doing this activity. And that's what's cool, especially at the world level, is every group actually has a different like format, a different method. It's hard to judge because like this is so different than the next thing, and the way you do this, and all of our skills are like pretty similar, but like then the way we implement the skills into an idea is like just vastly original group to group. So I'm feeling some appreciation in this moment, actually, which is rare because usually, you're teaching and it's like, how do I get points and all that stuff. But it's cool. It's nice to actually appreciate what people are doing because there's a lot of really smart people in our activity.
Yeah, dude, I want to say, like last year too, stuck at some of the guard shows. I remember I watched like CGT. It was either CGT Dallas or Denton or one of those or something. They did this like all orange show, and I was like, this is so sweet. And then there was a high school from Florida. It was like something Broward, like west or south or east or north. Or, one of those directions. But they did this like hip hop junkyard show, and I was like, this is so much fun to watch. But
that was
they
West
designed
Broward 18.
West Broward. All right, there it is.
Yeah. And when we did the Friends show, people were like, "Oh, you guys have seen Broward with the dumpster and the basketball hoop." We're like, "No, but that's great. I'm about it. About the grunge."
Yeah, for sure. That's a great show. But dude, and then like the Pride show with the doors and like the innovation and how they used them like last year. I'm like, this stuff is crazy.
Yeah, Pride every year, every other year.
A lot of creativity going on. A lot of creativity. But I think that is a discussion for another day with a little bit more knowledgeable person on here, possibly. So,
I could easily make myself look like a fool if we have somebody on here. So,
but let's avoid that for today. So, Dan, thanks for coming and hanging out. Everybody else, stay safe through all this. Be smart. Social distance. Pay attention to what's going on in the world. Hopefully, the marching activity, like the rest of everything else, will get back on track sooner rather than later. And hit us up on Instagram and Facebook for all updates on new episodes and updates for the podcast. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, whatever platform you prefer to listen on. We have a Patreon, again, to reiterate, patreon.com/AgedOutPodcast. If you want to hit us up with any kind of financial support, not required again, but always appreciated. And we will be back in a couple weeks with the next episode.
Peace.
See ya.